Missing persons cases never cease to fascinate me because of the mystery and possible horror aspect of each case. When it comes to cases such as the ones I covered in my first episode of The Haunted Hour, and more cases like those, I become almost obsessed with them. So, what about when it comes to missing persons cases that have happened in my own backyard? Well, the answer to that question is that I become much more interested and intrigued. Today we will be discussing missing persons cases that have happened in the state I live in, the gem state, good ol' Idaho. My name is Emerald, and welcome to the Haunted Hour. One place I really want to visit in my state of Idaho is Craters of the Moon National Monument and Reserve in southeast Idaho near Arco. Our first case is the disappearance of Joe Elliott Blakesley and Amy Linkert at this national monument. On September 20th, 2013, these two women were supposed to be back from their trip to the Craters of the Moon but did not return. They were officially reported as missing on September 24th. Because of a government shutdown, however, the official search could not be conducted until a week later on October 1st. Fortunately, a few rangers and volunteers were able to begin searching right away. The weird part about this case is that both of these women were well educated and well experienced in the outdoors. They knew what they were doing and they knew what to expect. Joe Elliott Blakesley was 63 years old and Amy Linkert was 69 years old. Their vehicle was found at the parking lot of the Tree Molds Trail, which is located at the north end of the park. Inside, searchers found their dogs, cell phones, and purses. Because they had left those items as well as their two dogs behind in their car, it indicates that they had went out on a short excursion, not planning on going anywhere far for very long. Meaning, whatever had happened to them on this part of their trip, they were not prepared for. On that day, September 25th, the body of Amy Linkert was discovered in a lava field northwest of the Tree Molds Trail. She was found face up in the lava field with no supplies or jacket. Searchers believe that she may have set out to find help, but then became disoriented or lost and eventually succumbed to the elements. 1 month later, in October 2013, the body of Joe Elliott Blakesley was eventually discovered. She was found a mile from where Amy Linkert was found. It was concluded that both women had died from exposure with signs of dehydration. It is unknown why they had become separated. Perhaps one or both had hurt themselves walking through the terrain, which is the most logical explanation here. Authorities found no sign of foul play, and therefore was ruled out. The weird facts about this case are that they had left their dogs and personal belongings inside their car with no supplies, food, or water. If they had truly intended on doing that, why would they travel so far? The terrain is very rough and rugged, so it wouldn't make much sense that they would travel so far knowing that. As I said before, these two women were experienced and smart with the outdoors. Why would they make such foolish decisions? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Along with that question, another one is what got them lost? What got them separated? If something else happened, what got them hurt? Now, I personally don't think anything weird or mysterious happened with this case. I lean more towards the fact that they just didn't make the smartest decisions, and the terrain made it very difficult for them to get to the help they needed. Although I don't think this case is weird or mysterious, it is still without a doubt tragic. Heading north now to Oro Grande, Idaho, we visit the case of a 27-year-old filmmaker named Terrence Woods. Terrence was part of a UK TV crew working in a remote location in the forests of Oro Grande on October 5th, 2018. He had filmed all over the world almost, so he was experienced. Originally planning on working till November, Terrence had called his father earlier in the week on the 1st and told him he was coming home early on October 10th. His father was not suspicious of this move, and was even unbothered. On the 5th, however, Terrence was acting very strange. At the end of the workday, he had sprinted down a steep slope towards the Penman mine and impressively did not fall or stumble. It was as if he knew exactly where he was going and where to plant his feet to avoid obstacles. The interesting thing about this, though, is that Terrence's father said that he was very clumsy. He would trip on the stairs all the time and he was flat-footed. There's almost no way Terrence could sprint through a forest perfectly without hitting anything or falling. He ran so fast that none of the other crew members could catch up to him, leading to his complete disappearance. Nobody knows where Terrence went, where he is, or why he decided to start running down the hill towards the mine. Terrence Woods was never found, and no trace or remains have ever been discovered. Maybe he ran into the mine and got lost in there? Was that all planned? We're not sure, which is why it is a chilling mystery. One thing we do know is that there were many contradictions in reporting. For example, Terrence was usually a well-rounded guy, ahead of the curve and very reliable and skillful in his job. Yet on the day he disappeared, his team reported that he looked anxious, worried, and unfocused. They said he was having a hard day emotionally and that he never really spent any time in the woods. This does not explain his actions on this day, however. Many small details were changed throughout their reports, which is suspicious, and nobody could nail down the specifics, such as who chased him, how far they chased him for, and how long they waited to contact authorities. They also said that he was bloody and had torn clothing, although no remains or trace of him were ever found. They had also said that authorities were already looking for him when they reported him missing, which obviously wasn't the case. None of it really adds up. A full search team was organized, with helicopters, dogs, ground crews, and infrared scanning, but to no avail. Foul play was ruled out, but I think the only reason he could run that fast and with ease navigating the forest is if he was running for his life. If there is any explanation, it is that for some unknown reason he ran into the Penman mine and never came out, and was never found. The scariest thing about this case is that the locals in this area said that people often go missing in those woods, and they discourage people from visiting the area. Why would they say that? 3 days before Terrence Woods ran into the forest, never to be seen again, Connie Johnson also met a similar fate. Connie Johnson, age 76, was a camp cook for Ritchie Outfitters at Big Fog Mountain near Big Rock, Idaho. It is a very remote location, only accessible by horseback or foot. On the morning of October 2nd, hunters went out on a hunting trip. The next day they had radio contact with Connie but could not understand her due to poor reception on the radio. When they had returned to the camp on October 5th, Connie and her dog Ace were nowhere in sight. They had vanished. A massive search party was organized for her with aircraft with heat technology from the U.S. Air Force, the Idaho National Guard, and a helicopter rescue team. Not a single trace of her has ever been found. The search was called off on October 16th. Since she was alone at the camp, nobody knows where she went or why. She was very experienced and knew what she was doing out there, since she used to be a park ranger. Acquaintances were shocked to learn about her disappearance and said that if she were ever lost in the woods, she could survive since she knows what she's doing out there. 3 weeks after her disappearance, however, her dog Ace turned up at the Moose Creek Ranger Station about 15 miles away from the campsite. But no Connie. A search was held again in the area of the ranger station, but it was ultimately fruitless. A big question here is, did she leave the woods? If so, why? There was no evidence of foul play, but that's not to say that it was impossible. If she went out for a hike, what happened to her? Did she encounter somebody out there or something? It's very hard to say because she has never been found, not one trace. Above all, what happened with Ace? Why did he survive and find the ranger station 15 miles away? This case is very intriguing and leaves us with more questions than answers. Number 1 on my list of places in Idaho that I'd love to visit is the Sawtooth Mountain Range. I don't know why, but I really like cool looking mountains, especially mountains that are in the middle of lush forests and lakes. Grand Teton National Park isn't too far away from me. It's my favorite national park I've ever been to. Craig Delroy Barnett, a man who was living in Jerome, Idaho, vanished in these woods and has never been seen again. Although not much information has been released to the public yet because it's still an open case, I thought I'd include this because it happened in a spot I really want to go to. Also, it is pretty intriguing. Craig set out for the woods on July 25, 2019, and never came home. Some of his favorite camping sites are in the Pin, Couch Summit, Big Smoky, South Hills, Sun Valley, and Stanley areas, and all were searched. Ultimately, no remains were ever found, and he is still missing to this day. The only clue they ever found was when a rancher moving cows into a stand of fir trees in the Sawtooth National Forest discovered his truck 3 weeks after hhis disappearance. His truck was a teal 1977 Ford F-150 XLT pickup truck with the Idaho license plate number 1BX0162. Upon this discovery, another search was launched, but sadly with no results. What could have happened to Craig Delroy Barnett is unknown, as the only thing that was ever found was his truck, with him nowhere to be found. Since there aren't many details I could find about this case, it is very hard to speculate on what could have happened. All I know is that he is missing in those woods somewhere, and whether or not it is natural or mysterious, it is still a tragic case. I honestly don't know how I forgot about this case, because I did hear about it, and I heard about it somewhat recently. I only just barely decided to include it in this video a day ago, because it was the anniversary. Dior Coons Jr. was just 2 years old when he vanished without a trace. On July 10, 2015, Dior Coons Jr. and his parents, Vernal Dior Coons and Jessica Mitchell, were camping at the Timber Creek Campground in Ladore, Idaho with Dior's grandpa Robert Walton and his friend Isaac Rainwand. Dior Coons Jr.'s parents took him into a convenience store, then dropped him off at the campsite when they got back with their grandpa Robert Walton, while the parents and Isaac went fishing nearby. When they had returned, Dior was nowhere in sight. When Robert was asked where he was, he said that he thought he saw them and he ran towards them. This quickly turned a fun fishing day into a nightmarish panic. Jessica Mitchell then called authorities after a small search for the child to report him missing. That day he was wearing oversized cowboy boots, blue pajama pants, and a camo jacket. He had shaggy blonde hair. Vernal, in talking about the area and terrain, described it as, "It's such a small area." That's what a lot of people don't understand. They just assume, how could you let your kid out of your sight? Well, this area is pretty well blocked in, and there's no way you couldn't not see him. A massive search was organized with dive teams, helicopters, ATVs, cadaver dogs, and a multitude of volunteers. The search turned up nothing. No remains, no trace, no clues. A few days after the search had been called off, Coons and Mitchell had believed their son was abducted. Suspicion, however, quickly fell upon the parents. Their stories fluctuated. They had failed polygraph tests. If there was foul play in this case, it's more than likely the parents are guilty. Some speculate that Dior wasn't even at the campground. Over the years, there were multiple private investigators that took the case. One claimed Dior was a victim of a homicide and that the parents were responsible. Another concluded that he was in fact abducted, but dropped the case when the parents weren't being truthful. A third private investigator stated that Isaac Rainwan had more to do with the case than suspected. However, Isaac heavily denies this. In 2019, a private investigator took 2 cadaver dogs to the campsite and found a downed tree with animal claw marks in it, but ultimately was inconclusive. Bones have been found at the campground, but upon further analysis, they were determined to be animal bones. In 2024, this private investigator had returned to the area with friends, in which they climbed a harsh route up a nearby mountain and made an interesting discovery. They had found a jacket, a fleece pullover, that appeared to have blood all over it and then had animal markings on it of scratching and biting and clawing to get whatever was in it. This North Face fleece pullover didn't have pockets in it, so there was nothing in a pocket for an animal to want to get. It was something wrapped up in this jacket that the animal was trying to get. They had found that it was manufactured around 2014 to 2015, which lines up with the timeline of his disappearance. While this was certainly a breakthrough in the case, there wasn't enough DNA on the jacket for any conclusion to be made. What happened to Dior Coons Jr.? Was it foul play caused by his parents, Grandpa or Isaac? Or did he simply wander off, get lost, and either succumb to the elements or fall prey to an animal? Nothing is conclusive. Whatever the case, no 2-year-old should ever have to go through something like this and lose his life. No family deserves to go through it either. Alright, this last case hits kind of close to home in a way. Someone very close to me knew this person personally as she went to high school with him. In fact, she's the one who told me about this case. Were it not for her, I possibly would have never known about this case. We go now to a place I've been to a handful of times, the Caribou-Targhee National Forest in southeastern Idaho. Christopher Holverson was just shy of 19 years old when he disappeared. On May 17, 1998, Chris and a few of his friends were camping at the Table Rock Campground. There were 7 people total. Only one adult was present. Throughout the night, they smoked marijuana and possibly some other drugs and alcohol, but it isn't clear. One camper admitted to marijuana use, however. Sometime between 9:30 and midnight, an altercation took place. Some reports say Christopher tripped over a rope getting out of his tent and was frustrated and walked straight into the woods. Other reports say that there was an actual fight that broke out. Whatever happened, however, Christopher walked into the woods to clear his head and to get away from all the commotion. He never returned back to the campsite. The only credible sighting of Christopher after this event was a man at another campground nearby that saw a tall figure wearing a blue tracksuit with white stripes on the side. This is what he was wearing, and he was a tall kid, but it is just a sighting. There were no other clues indicating what happened to him or where he went. Now, is this case mysterious? Not exactly. There's only 2 explanations for what happened. Either are plausible. He either wandered off too far, got lost, and succumbed to the elements, or an accident happened at the campsite and they were covering it up. The more likely answer is the former, especially with that sighting. It was cold that night, snow and sleet covered the ground, and he was not equipped for a night under the stars. The only weird thing about this is how no remains or traces of him have ever been found. There's almost no wildlife predators out there, and the terrain isn't terrible. It's hard to get lost. So if he did wander too much, then he really wandered too much. Which is entirely possible, however not super likely. The stories the other campers have told have evolved over time. There isn't much hard evidence to go off of, mostly just speculation, but I personally don't think foul play was involved. Whatever the reason, however, Christopher Holverson remains missing without a trace, and it is no less a tragedy. I hope to one day be able to visit some of these sites, the Sawtooth Mountains especially. I am a fan of the outdoors. I absolutely love being in nature and seeing the beauty of the world. But I also have a strange love for missing persons cases, and especially of horror. Perhaps one day I could join the search for these missing people. While not all of these cases are mysterious or downright scary, they are nonetheless interesting. What do you think happened in each of these cases? Foul play, negligence, pride, mystery, or something else?